Hey guys, Board now back with you. On this video I will be talking about the 5th episode of Amazon Prime's Tales from the Loop, and the episode is called Control, so over halfway through now. And this episode, the setup is then you have this character Ed, who's like, he's got a family. And at the start of the story, we learn that his son is in a coma, and his son's Danny, so that sort of links into like a previous episode, I think episode 2. And early in the episode, that like the family home is robbed, or at least it's a suspicion that it's been robbed, and the daughter, because they've got a young daughter who's mute, she sees the guy who did it and kind of sees him through the window, so it's quite a traumatic thing for her. And the family are like really edgy about, is the guy gonna come back, do they need to worry? And there's also this thing where like a colleague of Ed, the lead character's name, is a work colleague of his, has also had a burglary recently. So it's sort of a thing around town where there's this concern, and there's quite a lot of stress at home because obviously the son's in the coma, then they're not sure if he's going to come out of it. There's also financial worries, and I think we see throughout the episode, and there's a strain on the relationship between Ed and his wife Kate, and there's sort of pressure from her for him to, I think, ask his employer or something, or his brother-in-law, something like that, like a family member, to sort of borrow some money so that they can, or to ask to borrow some money so they can obviously pay the bills. And it's kind of, Ed's a very proud man and doesn't really want to do it, but the whole basis of the episode is then he sees this robot because he works some sort of job like near the loop, where the loop is based. I mean, from the uniforms they were wearing, he could have been like a security guard. It was a bit hard to tell, or it could have been something more like a factory type setup, but somewhere near the loop, and like in this kind of scrapyard type place, he sees like this kind of giant sized robot that moves like a human. And yeah, it's a bit more of a tank almost, but in a robot sort of form, so a slightly bigger sort of robot. And this kind of explores the idea of Ed basically buying the robot and taking it home, and that's kind of his plan to make sure they've got protection. So we see him training the robot, we see the robot interacting with the daughter, and that's, for a while, that's quite a neat thing because she seems to really enjoy the robot, and it's certainly playing with like some classic sci-fi themes to do with us getting ever closer to technology, like the lines really blurring, and the whole idea of like artificial intelligence. So one of the things in this episode is that when they're training the robot, they sort of do hand movements, so, and then the robot kind of like patterns itself after that, copies the hand movement, which there's some really cute scenes with that, especially with the young girl, but at the same time, yeah, it's kind of prodding at those ideas to do with the blurring of the lines. So there's something quite Spielbergian about this episode at time. There is kind of this playful sort of charm, and really it does have this quite sweet sort of quality, along with obviously the more sinister moments, because the lead character Ed, he is very kind of down on his luck, has a lot of hardship, and it does deal in some quite sort of dark moments at least, and the whole thing kind of builds to the problems of bringing this robot home, and kind of almost, yeah, how much of a risk it is, but also the reaction around town because the neighbours start complaining about the presence of the robot, and they're concerned. So it kind of goes into that as an issue. Um, and I think it's another pretty good episode. I don't think I like it as much as some of the others. It might even be my least favourite. I like the actor, the lead guy playing Ed. I've seen him in one or two other things, I think. He's certainly got a familiar face. But he's very good at playing like the down on his luck, kind of every type man. And I think you really feel for him. He's really able to draw you into like his sort of mindset, and it has this very low key sort of quality. Not a lot actually happens in the plot, but it's all done quite nicely. As I said, there's some great moments with the kid, and I think the father daughter bond is you really get a sense of their relationship, which is nicely played. It's actually odd with the wife Kate, because for the first part of the episode, she's actually played as a bit extreme and a bit over the top. And I think they do change that later on, where she does seem a bit more genuine, a bit more like she is concerned. But I guess they're meant to be having like marital problems. But yeah, it's sort of funny. I think maybe for the sake of drama that they made her a bit more like unlikable early on, where she did kind of go to extremes in just the way she sort of reacted to things. But they have a fight quite early on, because the daughter is kind of left on her own. So Ed's been at work, and I think Kate's like meant to either pick the daughter up, or maybe is supposed to be looking after her. And at one point she gets bullied by a group of boys, so that kind of leads to kind of this fight. And there's a couple of fights throughout the episode, and obviously the whole thing about Danny in the coma is really pressuring things. And there are a couple of actually really sad, moving but heartbreaking moments. I think again, getting into the Spielberg stuff, there's a scene where the daughter is obviously talking to the father, and the father is trying to be upbeat about the potential of the son coming out of the coma. And at one point the daughter, just because she's really enjoying getting to know the robot and playing with the robot, and she kind of says, yeah, then he, he's like closer, or he's like a brother almost to me now, or that I don't have a proper brother, and he's kind of going to die. I can't remember exactly what the phrase is, but obviously the father is taken aback by this and says, "Oh, that's no way to talk about your brother." But yeah, it's quite an interesting and sad little scene. But there's some great stuff with the daughter certainly, and again, it's unpacking these ideas. It's kind of getting into the whole meat of this idea that then this robot could replace, her brother, sort of thing. And I think, along with the way things escalate in the town, I think this is the ultimate reason why Ed gets rid of it, or sells it back, gives it back to the woman who he bought it off. I think at the end of the day, they just decide it's not worth it. It's causing too many sort of hassles, and life is actually a lot more simpler and easier if they just get back to normal. And I think that's another kind of critique of this idea of, maybe in the future, if we're maybe gonna have these robots, then can take over things, or we can use them for things like protection. I mean, I'm not saying either way if it's right or wrong, but I think this certainly, this sort of series, I think, is kind of getting at the whole idea of, yeah, sometimes humans just need to be humans. Sometimes they need to face problems themselves, and kind of what will be will be. I mean, sometimes you just have to put life to a chance, and to human error, or to let it lay in the hands of humans. And sometimes bad things just happen, and it's not always the answer to just like hide behind machines or robots. Um, but yeah, things do sort of get out of hand at one point, because we get an appearance by Jacob. And that's actually a nice little twist, because it turns out that it was actually Jacob who the daughter saw that night. So it actually wasn't like an intruder or someone trying to burgle them. It was actually Jacob who came to them, or came to the daughter. And that's another interesting touch, and a nice little link actually from episode 2. Because obviously Jacob's like close friends with her brother, and the whole thing that went down in that episode. But yeah, it leads to this kind of ruckus where they go to the barn together, the daughter and Jacob, and like the dad thinks there's like an intruder again, so he takes the robot with him, and that's when disaster almost strikes, like, because the daughter comes out of the barn and the robot is kind of poised to do something, and so it just stops short of like attacking her, and that's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back in a way. Then so they decide, yeah, it's probably best to go back to normal. There's another interesting scene actually with Ed's like workmate, who we see occasionally them like hanging out. They go to a bar at one point, and it's the colleague who also had like a burglary himself, and so they're kind of talking about the whole thing. And I think it's earlier in the episode when he is telling Ed about what happened, and it kind of gets Freudian slip there, Ed's mind like racing and thinking about these things. But they're having like this sort of quite deep conversation, and because that at this point it is edging towards something quite dark, where Ed is maybe considering, almost like, yeah, it would be worth killing someone, or if I had to protect my family, I would. And then the other guy kind of says, I just couldn't go through it, I just couldn't kill a guy. And Ed basically snaps. He's kind of like, well, clearly you don't know what it's like to have a family. And the other guy says, well, that's not fair, I can imagine. And he says, no, you can't. And it's a really strong sort of like moment. And I think it's at this point in the episode where Ed potentially is letting his emotions spill over, and maybe going a bit too far. But again, it sort of pokes at that sort of thing, maybe bringing up the idea of like vigilante type law. And I think, to be fair, obviously on a very basic level, a lot of people would, if their family were in threat, they would potentially kill someone. Obviously, that's not that radical to say, but yeah, at the same time, it is this sort of murky grey area where how far is too far. Like, obviously, there's things you can do to scare them off or to call the police or whatever you want to say, but to actually kill them, especially if you don't have to, that's another matter. Sometimes if push comes to shove. So it's another decent episode. As I said, I don't think I liked it as much as like probably the previous four, but it's another very solid episode, nicely sort of crafted. I really liked, as I said, the lead performance, and the scenes with the daughter were very like well done and quite sweet at times. And it actually has sort of a happy ending in a way, or as happy as it sort of could be, where they do go back to normal. They kind of learn from the thing with the robot, and it sort of brings them closer together as a family at the end. So that's sort of surprising. I think this sort of thing you maybe figure there's going to be, because I think in the previous episode it's been a bit more murky, or you've had some sort of darker twist at the end, but this one actually does resolve itself sort of quite neatly. So there you have it. That's Tales from the Loop, the latest, well, my latest episode to review anyway. That's episode 5, Control. If you've been watching the series, then please comment along below, or comment below on the episode, what you thought about it and what you think of the overall series so far. But thanks for listening. I'll be back with more Tales from the Loop reviews soon, and many more TV and film reviews coming up on the channel. So thanks for listening, and goodbye.